I would say that perhaps as we were doing some of the BOCA BOH amendments, you know, the question really arose, what's an ADU anymore? Because you could essentially put a duplex on a piece of property. And so I think that's how we were maybe circumventing that previously. But this makes it clear that 2 ADUs are permitted. And frankly, I think these changes define what an ADU is again. So.
The emergency ordinances are go back to our housing changes that we made about 1.5 years ago. In the process of making those changes, we also reorganized several sections of code just to make them clearer, and since we were already kind of opening things up and making some adjustments, we made some of those organizational changes within the code. In the process of doing that, we recently discovered that our approval criteria for plats, we had left a gap in the way that those were accounted for in such a way that certain approval criteria, very important ones related to health and safety, concurrency, making sure that plats are consistent with the comprehensive plan. The plain English reading of the language right now would not apply those considerations. Nobody has noticed this up until just about a week ago or two, and we had a planner looking through as they were processing a plat application and noticed, wait a second, this language is not reading the way it should. So we're requesting an emergency ordinance just to restore the language back to the standard usage that has historically been the case. So that is the first emergency ordinance. In the process of working with legal on drafting that emergency ordinance, they also suggested that we really should have some language in our code related to the relationship of Plan Commission to the adoption of emergency changes or interim changes or moratoria within the zoning code. The code that governs the adoption process for text amendments to our development code was written with a very normal process in mind, but obviously emergencies and interim ordinances and moratoria sort of sit outside the normal way of doing business. And there wasn't really any code that presented a path for how, who should be involved or how should that happen. So our proposal is to introduce, this is the second emergency ordinance, is to introduce some language just to codify what has been our standard usage up to this point, which is that if there is an emergency that potentially affects the health and safety of residents, there is no need to go through a Plan Commission process to get a recommendation and then have council take action. As an emergency, it needs to be taken care of immediately. And on the same note, it would be for interim ordinances or moratoria under RCW, I forget the number, but the RCW dealing with moratoria and interim ordinances, that also would just go to council, that there isn't need for a Plan Commission process. Obviously, Plan Commission can be involved at any point that council wants it to be. And if it's an interim ordinance or a moratorium, there is a work plan adopted that would envision the involvement of Plan Commission in whatever the permanent fix is that needs to be in place. So those are the two emergencies, and I'm happy to answer questions on those.
Real fast, I'm wondering, I totally understand the need for the emergency on the first one, but on the second, why would we need to particularly do that as an emergency?
I think just because there isn't guidance in the code, the preference would be for there to be guidance adopted prior to adopting the emergency change to the code, so that essentially the path is adopt the process for adopting emergency amendments by emergency so that it applies immediately, and then adopt the emergency change under that new process that's adopted.
Because unless there's something that's going forward as an interim change that's planned, and maybe there is, it just seems like it wouldn't necessarily have to be done immediately.
Well, the request for the emergency change to the plat would be the emergency change that needs that Plan Commission, that language around the Plan Commission thing.
They tie together.
Yeah.
Got it.
So that's why those two are related.
Okay.
Any other questions on those two?
No.
Okay.